And welcome to today's Midday Show. I am excited, not only because Mark is out of the office, which I am celebrating, I'm also excited because we have North Central Cinema's Joe Smith back with us again today. I'm losing track. We're on episode maybe 4 or 5 that you've joined us?
Probably 4, yeah.
We're getting up there. I'm really, really excited because I get to talk about something that I have very much a love-hate relationship with. That is the scary movie, horror, thriller genre. Yep. Love-hate. We're going to go through it. We're going to break it down for you. I want to talk to you about some of the Hitchcock stuff, kind of the foundation that he laid, because I know that's your favorite. Is it your favorite? Is that fair to say?
I would say Hitchcock is my favorite horror director. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Hitchcock a little bit as well. And then just some stuff that I've seen recently, some different things, your favorites, things I want to touch around. But this is basically October movie season. So we want to dive into the horror genre.
Everybody busts out their scary movie list at this time of year.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a scariest list. I just know what I've enjoyed.
Favorites.
And what I know what I've enjoyed, and I know what I've struggled keeping my eyes open for. So we're going to dive into all of that. I want to start here, if you don't mind. My love-hate relationship with this. So I have down here the reasons why I love and the reasons why I hate horror movies, scary movies. I'll let you decide.
Is one list longer than the other, Jeff?
No, they're about even.
Okay,
it's pretty fair. Here's what I want to ask you. Do you want me to start with love or should I start with hate?
Start with hate. Let's finish with love. I think that's more positive.
No, that's fine. So here's the first, and this is the obvious one. And I want to get this out of the way. I'm a baby. Like I am like a watch it through 2 fingers, kind of like trying to keep my eyes open. The other thing that I find myself doing is if I'm terrified to watch something, I'll kind of do like the scan through. Okay. So I'll turn like an hour and a half
That's
movie.
Cheating, you know.
100% cheating. But here's the thing, like if it's a really good movie or if I've been told it's really good, I will watch it as it's supposed to be in the dark, full feature. So I want to get that one out of the way. Here's my one, and you can probably touch on some of this, especially with because Hitchcock was so good, I think, at decision making and what he did. I just hate poor decision making in horror movies. It's really
like that commercial they have now, right?
Yes.
Let's go to the chainsaws, or hide behind the chainsaws, I think they say.
Yes. So here's my question to you, because you've dove into this before, and obviously Hitchcock is a master. I almost said kind of a master. Is a master at this. Why is it so difficult? Why do you think people struggle so much creating horror movies where people aren't making stupid decisions?
It's because that's a tough question to answer. So yeah. I'm just coming up off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. You get falsity in books or movies when the actions are not emerging organically from the characters.
Yes.
Therefore, the author or the screenwriter is saying, I want A, B, and C to happen, and I have to shove my characters through this scenario. So the horror director says, we got to have at least 3 murders. And so that's his guiding principle. He doesn't care he doesn't care so much about the characters as he does about the deaths. So that creates an imbalance. And if you can have characters who are believable and they're dictating what happens, it would be much more realistic and acceptable, I think. It's the fact that they've got this formula, murder, and that's driving the whole storyline, and you're not allowing the characters room to breathe, I think.
You said 2 things there that caught my ears. The first one is you used the word believable. Out of all the horror genre and everything, I feel like a lot of times when I watch, like the Hitchcock that I have watched, it seems believable. The characters seem believable. Do you think he had an advantage with the stories that he had? Was there an advantage telling stories back when he did, where, the lack of sci-fi and CGI and all these things, like, did he have an advantage making it believable, or have you ever thought about that before? Because I do think, like, when I watch a Hitchcock film, it all seems very down to earth. It all seems very
I would
believable.
say it's almost intangible, Jeff, because if you look at Hitchcock's films on the surface, many of them are not very believable. Like what happens in North by Northwest. Have you seen North by Northwest? So if you're going to kill a guy, you're not going to shoot him from a biplane. That's just stupid.
Sure.
No organized criminal in history would decide to kill a guy that way. And yet Hitchcock had a way of filming this in such and I don't know enough about camera angles and all that to pin it down. but in such that you never question it.
Well, I bought in.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better word. Is I just always bought into it.
It's something about the way he films it just brings you into the film. And within, I've had people watch Psycho and without even, it's 45 minutes in that film for the first murder, but you're hooked within about 7 minutes because he gets you involved in the characters and he's just so absorbing in terms of the storyline. I don't know that it's a time period. Plenty of guys do that nowadays. I mean, I have to mention probably one of the scariest recent horror films I saw was Hereditary. And that's about the limit of what I can stand in terms of sheer hair-raising terror. But even after literally 75 seconds of that film, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty much hooked. This guy clearly knows exactly there's no horror, no blood, but you can just tell that the director knows exactly what he's doing in terms of where to put the camera and how to tell a story and how to create a world. You talked about world building on the first one of these.
Yeah.
That's it too, Jeff. You have to build a world.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of directors don't bother to do.
Well, that's gonna come up in the things that I love. Yeah. The other part too about the poor decision making and how hard it is to get characters to kind of end up where you need them to, so they make these poor decisions. It's part of the love-hate is I feel like a lot of times they struggle to do it, so I hate it. But then when you find a scary movie or a horror movie that does it well, where they're not making poor decisions, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so it is this kind of like this higher arc, and I think that's why I am always pulled back into the genre.
So give me one where the decision making is convincing.
I go back to Get Out whenever this conversation comes up because Get Out, in a weird way, Get Out shouldn't have worked as well as it did because, like, to the point, like, why would he be willing to stay at the house? Why would he
on the surface, it doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense. But as you're watching the movie, there's never a point where I'm watching him and I'm like, he's making a poor decision. I think I would have made the same choices. And then when he realizes it, I'm like, I think that's when it would have dawned on me. So I think that's an example where, like, when it works, it's like there's nothing better. But you almost have to dig through those, I don't want to call them bad horror movies, but you almost have to dig through the
formula ones.
Yes.
Is what you would call them.
Yes.
Formula films.
Yes. So this is another one. I'm out on human torture. I can't do it. I don't understand. Yes.
Torture porn is what they call it.
I don't have a monster eat somebody, have an alien shoot somebody with a ray gun. Like, I have no issue necessarily with, like, the violence or watching people die on screen. For me, it's just like the human torture aspect of some of the stuff. I'm out. I don't get it. There's no joy. It's sick to my stomach. I do not understand that. So, I mean, I'm throwing out 20% of horror movies, 25% of horror movies without even seeing them. So that's another one. My last thing, there is a repetitiveness to it. I find myself a lot of times where I will watch a horror movie and it will be fine. But at the end of it, I feel like I have seen it before. I feel like I've seen that outcome. I've seen that world.
Well, actually, you had these franchises like Friday the 13th and Halloween, which I've even lost count of how many films there are in those franchises. And then something like Texas Chainsaw keeps getting remade. I think it's been made 3 times now.
Yes.
So you are seeing the same film over and over again, essentially.
And that's how it feels.
When you get something like Get Out, you can watch Get Out for a while and not even know that it's a horror film till you get about halfway through it. And that's what the film has to do. It has to be original.
Yes, I agree. So those are the things I hate. All right, so good. So we got those out of the way. Let's throw them to the side. Here's why this stuff keeps pulling me back in. I have to know the ending. If I see when I see a good horror movie trailer and it comes up, and I don't know how it's really going to play out or what's going to happen, I just have to know.
Okay.
And I feel like there's not like a lot of drama trailers, a lot of superhero trailers, it doesn't do that to me. It does not kind of pull me in the way that this genre does. Yes. Okay. So I find myself always being pulled in because of that. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I think villains are incredibly great characters when done correctly. A little bit like I said about when people when there's decision making that I can relate to in the movie, it makes it like this holy grail. When there is a phenomenal villain, when there is a great, just scary character, it is chef's kiss. Yeah. I mean, it is. There's very few things like
that's what Hitchcock said too. He said the quality of the film will depend on whether you have a good villain or not. And I
Yes.
think he was talking about Notorious at the time because
Okay.
the character is very urbane and suave, but is also kind of a madman. So and Hitchcock did have good villains, including some that with two wings.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Just another thing I had down here. There is like a survival problem-solving logic to horror genre movies, where even if people, as you're watching it, you're kind of like, "That's not what I would have done," or "That's that problem-solving," where you're sitting there. This is a bad example, but one of the more recent movies I loved was The Martian, and I liked The Martian just because it was problem-solving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're sitting there. Scary movies, it's almost like the inverse. You're problem solving, but you're watching people who most of the time are really bad at it. But you do eventually run into these circumstances where you're with somebody and they're problem solving and they're fighting their way out of their circumstances. So I do like that aspect of it as well.
So you like there's like a subgenre of people who are like stuck in some terrifying circumstance. Like, have you seen the preview for The Menu?
Yes,
That
I
looks like
have.
it might
Yes.
that's one you're like, well, I got to know the ending of
I
that one,
have to
right?
know what is happening and why these people are there and how are they going to get out?
Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt. I also have here the last two, and this one's selfish. I'm a sucker for apocalyptic settings. I've told Mark this a couple of times on the show before. World building, I know apocalyptic settings is not like incredibly difficult. Like it's not hard to burn All right, and we're back. Little power outage. We survived it. How was that for scary movie conversation?
It got a little too real there for a minute, Jeff.
We survived. The last thing that I was talking about things that I loved about the horror genre. I'm a sucker for the apocalyptic setting. And I was
Right.
saying to you, I realized that it's not necessarily difficult to burn the world down. However, what comes out of it, the setting and how people are navigating that world, and even how like writers and producers and directors are navigating that world for their storytelling, there's no better world building for me than an apocalyptic setting. Just my personal preference. I'm a sucker for it.
So, but that doesn't always generate a horror film.
It
So,
doesn't.
so what films are we thinking of then?
I'm trying to think. Well, so like the one for me that I struggle with the most are zombie movies, because I don't really care about zombies.
Yeah, and
like I know there's a huge.
It's obviously never going to happen, so it's not that scary.
Yes. So the zombie craze is like not a thing for me. However,
man.
I know, but what's weird is I watch every movie and series about zombies because of the world setting.
Yeah.
Like I'm a sucker for that kind of like having to start over, rebuild, navigate that world. So that's like an example where like in the horror genre, I could care less about what's actually happening, but the world itself, I'm fascinated by that aspect of it. There's a couple. I'm trying to think. There's some like what was the
My brain is telling me there's one or two really obscure ones that are quite terrifying, but I can't dig them up.
there is this isn't even horror, but you do have like the monster, like Monsters, which was a foreign film where they're trying to get from Mexico over the U.S. border, and there's basically like foreign aliens like running across the border, and that one's interesting. I'm trying to think of just like horror genre movies where the apocalyptic setting is the villain, right? Is the monster. It's not necessarily that the monsters are creating. That's hard to do. I can't think of many off the top of my head. I probably would like that if someone came up with a way to do it.
Start working on
Maybe Mark and I need to work on that. The last thing that I have here that I love, and I had a hard time trying to figure out how to explain this, but hopefully you can help me with it. There is something about the horror genre where when a character is trying to get away, trying to solve the issue, trying to figure out what to do, horror lends yourself to getting into the mind of the main character like very few movies do. When there is a main character that is trying to survive, trying to navigate this world that they have fallen into, you are much more inclined to feel their emotions than maybe you are in a sports movie or a drama movie or something else. You almost are inside with them. And I think horror does an incredible job with that very few genres can. And I'm a sucker for that as well.
Yeah. But that would work best going back a few minutes to earlier in the discussion when you have a character who's believable and who makes good decisions.
Yes.
So then it's very easy to track with them in that case.
Yes. So there you go. So that's my love-hate relationship with this genre. I can't explain it better than that. I don't know if I'll ever actually solve it, but that's where I'm at.
You mean come down on one side or the other?
Yes.
I when you said that, I kind of resonated with it, Jeff, because I also have a love-hate relationship. I mean, if you asked me for a list, list your favorite scary movie, not necessarily scariest, but just the ones that you admire the most, they would all be older films.
Okay.
There'd be nothing more recent than maybe.
Why do you think that is, if you don't mind me cutting you
I
off?
will tell you why. It's because in the modern films, there's too much gore for me.
Okay.
I just can't stand all that. Well, it's not just the torture thing, but the just over-the-top gore. And then some of the more recent films too. I mean, I hate to say this, but you just get a little more sensitive when you're older. I mean, I've occasionally, and also if it's in the theater, I usually have to go see it myself or watch it by myself in the living room because my wife doesn't like them. And then it's weird watching if you watch a couple horror movies by yourself, you can really get unhinged.
Okay.
I remember, I mean, we have to talk about some specific titles here, but one that goes on my favorite list is the Japanese version of The Ring, which is called Ringu.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, and it's got like almost no gore in it at all. But I made the mistake of watching it by myself.
Okay.
It's short. There's almost no gore at all, but there's a couple of scenes that just make the top of your head come off.
Yeah.
And one of the execs who was getting ready to make The Ring was watching Ringu and said I had to turn it off. That's how bad it was. And this is a hardened Hollywood executive.
Sure.
So I have a hard time with the intensity.
Okay.
Sometimes it leaves me feeling emotionally devastated.
Okay.
And I have a very hard time with the gore. And I greatly admire horror films that manage to scare you to death without being super gross and disgusting.
Yeah.
Like Paranormal Activity, which has
Yep.
almost nothing in it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a couple of other. Sixth Sense is gross in a couple spots, but for the most
Sure.
part is
It's
very
up there.
restrained.
Yeah.
And Ringu is another one. So there's quite a few that or some of the older ones like Cat People,
Yeah.
which was made in the 40s and probably doesn't stand the test of time real well, but I happen to like that film a lot.
So to put you on the spot a couple of times, because I'm curious, do you have like a moment that was the scare? Like, do you have that pivotal, like, I've never been more scared?
I do.
Or
I'll tell you
I
exactly
would
what
love
it
to
was.
hear it. I'm very, very
It
curious.
was the final scene in Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
When he puts on the night vision glasses.
Yes.
Now you got to remember, this is 30 years ago.
Mhm.
You know, horror's changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
But my wife and I saw it in the theater. It had just come out. I went to see it because I loved Anthony Hopkins, basically. And he also had not become a superstar at that point.
Okay.
He had done a few interesting things. But so we didn't really know how intense of a film that was going to be. It had not developed a reputation yet. And that moment where, well, first of all, when you realize they're knocking on a different door, and he pulls that fast one with you as to who's at the door.
Yeah.
And then when he turns the lights out and put those glasses on, that really did it for me. That was I really felt like climbing under my seat. How about you? Do you have one?
I'm trying to think if I have a scare. Again, this is so hard for me because, as I admitted, I am a baby when it comes to this stuff. I do remember being very, very young, and I remember the first time ever seeing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
And I probably saw it when I was too young.
The original?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I feel like it almost doesn't count.
Yeah.
Because it was more just like shock, So I don't know if I have a moment. I do remember the first time watching. I remember the first time watching Paranormal Activity and being in a college apartment and being absolutely terrified to walk outside of the room by myself. I don't know. I don't know if I have like a scariest because I'm such a baby. I feel like it all just kind of like forms and gels together.
The young thing is important too. I mean, I have a friend who somehow or other his parents let him watch Halloween when he was 7.
Okay.
And he said he threw up in bed that night. So, but at the same time, he thereafter has always been fascinated by scary movies.
Yeah.
But I don't think the original Halloween is that great of a movie. I mean, it's okay. I think it's a little formulaic. It's a little cheesy. But I think that had a sort of a landmark effect on him just because he was way too young to have watched a movie like that. So parents, try to be responsible and don't let your kid get out there and see some movie like that's going to scar them for life.
I hate giving Mark credit. But Mark said that he doesn't think Halloween is a great horror genre series. He thinks it's a great date movie series.
Oh, there you go.
I actually kind of agree with him on that sentiment. If you're looking for a date that's going to, she's going to want to hold your hand, that's probably, that's not a bad one to take them to every October. So here's another thing that we do, because I know you're really into movies. I don't know if you've watched any horror series.
I haven't.
Okay.
I'll keep this brief.
Yeah.
Because it's a detour. But I do so much reading, Jeff, that I'm, I read about 120 books a year.
Okay.
And I'm hesitant to get into a series because I don't want to commit to 13 or 26 episodes, or sometimes it's only 8 or 10.
Yeah.
So I don't watch too many series.
Okay.
But I know there's been a lot of great ones. I've heard that American Horror Story is really awesome.
Yes, I saw the first season. It's on my queue, like, to catch up and watch the rest of them. I will keep this very brief then, because what my girlfriend and I do is every October we pick a series to watch.
Okay.
So in 2018 we did The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Which I cannot recommend. It's on Netflix. I cannot recommend.
Somebody else is recommending that to me very highly just a couple of weeks ago.
Just very, very well done. There are 2 different scenes in that series. There's one scene that terrifies me. And then there's a second scene where, and I don't think I'm giving anything away, they are in a circle and the camera work for like 15 minutes straight, it never cuts. And you are just in this circle with the people. And it is unbelievably well done. And it has stuck with me forever. 2019, 2020, we did Stranger Things. We caught up on it. Yep. So we did back-to-back Octobers there. Last October, we did Midnight Mass on Netflix. I cannot recommend Midnight Mass enough. It touches on all aspects of belief. It touches on aspects of religion. It touches on aspects of villains, and there's a little bit of vampirism in it. It is absolutely incredible, and it's only 7 episodes,
Okay.
so you can knock it out fairly quickly. Really, really good. And then we just finished The Watcher on Netflix, which is based off of a true story, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's about a couple that bought a house in New Jersey, and they started receiving letters from someone that referred to themselves as the Watcher. We enjoyed the series, didn't love the series, but the story is incredibly fascinating. We actually enjoyed more doing the
research.
Yes, we went down rabbit holes online with different news coverages and different YouTube videos. Really, really neat. So there's horror movie recommendations for series.
You reminded me of one other film that really works and that does not have any gore in it at all. Is based on the same book. It's called The Haunting.
Okay.
I believe there are 2 Haunting movies, and The Haunting of Hill House, I think, are all based on books by Shirley Jackson, who wrote The Lottery, a very famous short story. And the Haunting, 62, 63, directed by Robert Weis, who's a veteran director, really has some really, really scary scenes. Old classic black and white haunted house story, but no gore.
Okay.
And it's just brilliantly made.
Well, let me ask you this, because I just kind of took over with the series. Do you have any book recommendations for anybody who would want to read a scary book or horror that you've read lately or in the last couple of years?
I don't read a lot of horror. I do like Stephen King pretty well, although he's kind of pooped out a little. I mean, he keeps cranking out books, but they're not as good as they used to be.
I was just going to ask you if I could say something controversial. I'm kind of Stephen King'd out.
Yeah, well, you think the whole world would be right now. He's written about 70 books, I think, at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think what happened is when all these streaming platforms needed content, it was just really easy to grab any Stephen King you could, slap it together, and throw it up. So I feel, which is awful to say, because I think it's brilliant. Like, I think Stephen King is good. I don't know. Like, when I hear someone say based off of Stephen King, I'm kind of like, again, like we're doing, I don't know.
But since you were asking about books, I think my favorite scary book is Misery.
Okay.
I think that's probably the most scared I ever was reading a book.
How do you feel about that transition, book to movie?
You mean that in this particular case?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they did a good job.
Okay.
That's Rob Reiner, a good cast.
Yeah.
And an interesting trivia thing is when they were getting ready to make Misery, Warren Beatty was at the height of his career. He had just made Dick Tracy, and they wanted him to play Paul Sheldon. And he said, "No, you don't want me as Paul Sheldon." I mean, he basically told them, "I'm too pretty for that role.
Okay.
You need someone like James Caan." And they said, "All right." So that was Beatty recognizing you can't put a pretty boy like me in that role. You need somebody who's a little bit more of a hard ass.
Okay.
And so I think that's kind of And then an adjunct to that is a few years ago they did Misery on Broadway, and Bruce Willis played Paul Sheldon. But Bruce is such a tough guy, so admittedly indestructible, that they had to play it as a comedy. So it was more of a campy sort of, and it was very funny. Yeah. Because the actress they hired to play Annie. Oh, I'm totally blanking on her name. Laurie Metcalf. Okay. Is an incredible pro. She was absolutely brilliant. And but they couldn't play it as a horror. They had to play it the comedy a little
That
bit.
was all news to me. That is fascinating. Yep. I never would have thought of Bruce Willis being like too tough to play the role. But it kind of makes sense.
You just know that he's not gonna. You just know that he's gonna come out of it. With James Caan, you're not so sure. Yeah. He's got a little more woundedness and vulnerability in his screen persona than Willis does.
Interesting. So I said the last thing that I wanted to do, if we had any recent recommendations, kind of like our favorites, anything. Basically, this is our chance to gush over anything we want to gush over. So I know we touched on some Hitchcock stuff earlier. Please sing his praises. If someone who's never dove into Hitchcock, is there a starter? Is there would you recommend them going chronologically? Would you?
Well, if you're going to go chronologically, you have to start in the silent era, and I don't think too many of our viewers are going to haul up a silent film. And a lot of Hitchcock's silent films don't hold up that well anyway. Okay. I will tell you a little story. Okay. Story time. Yeah. I did an art seminar at Camp Susquehanna up near Trout Run about it was about 3 years ago, I suppose, and the director there was like, well, if you're going to talk about the arts, we got to show a movie. These college age kids were there for like 4 or 5 nights.
Okay.
And we did all this discussion about art, aesthetics and everything. So he said, "What movie do you want to show?" And I thought, let's try Rear Window, Hitchcock, 1954. Yeah. And I'm thinking, yeah, this film is like 65 years old now. Most of these kids don't know who Grace Kelly was, but we'll try it.
Okay.
Jeff, they were screaming out loud. I wish that Alfred Hitchcock could have been there to see this movie so much. They were shrieking, and they're yelling at the screen, "Don't do that!"
Right.
It was incredible to see. And the other funny adjunct is like this one young man was there, and part of the plot is that James Stewart is hesitant to marry his girlfriend, played by Grace Kelly, and right in the middle of the film, this kid just goes, "That's the woman he doesn't want to marry," because Grace Kelly is one of the most beautiful women who ever appeared on the screen.
Sure.
So I recommend Rear Window as a starter.
Okay.
There's a couple moments that don't quite work because the technology just gets away from Hitchcock.
Okay.
The shots look fake.
Sure.
But it's romantic, it's funny, it's scary, it's got a really good plot, and it's beautifully, beautifully filmed. It's a masterpiece, and it's definitely one of his 5 or 6 greatest films. And I think it's hard not to like that movie.
I agree. I want to bring this up to you because you had brought in how like the technology, you felt like it had gotten away from them a couple of times. I grew up, and The Birds has a very like, I don't want to say sacred place for me, but like it is one of the first real horror movies that I had ever seen that like it was just scary enough that I felt like the urge, but it wasn't so scary that I was like, I can't watch it.
Turn it off. Yeah.
I am terrified to recommend it to younger people because of what you just described. I'm not sure how to explain to them what the birds will look like, some of the chase scenes. So it's weird because like I'm like, oh, I really love it, but I'm always hesitant to recommend it.
Yeah, Hitchcock, if you look at Hitchcock's career, for the most part, he was making a film every year. The Birds took him 3 years to make.
Okay.
Psycho was 1960 and The Birds was 1963. And that was by far his most technically challenging film. I don't know if you know this or not, but because they didn't have computers back then,
right?
In some of those bird attacks, like the one at the schoolhouse, 2 old ladies sat down with India ink pens and drew the birds by hand on each cell of the film. If you can imagine, there's 24 frames a second.
Right.
If you can imagine. And it's effective, but it doesn't look so cool to us anymore.
Right.
But on the other hand, some of the shots do still work.
Yes.
The overhead shot of the gas station on fire.
That's exactly the one I was thinking.
The final shot with the car moving out across the through the birds that are being so very quiet for the moment. Those shots still work pretty well.
Yes.
So I don't know how well the birds works now.
And there's an eeriness. I mean, this is something I left off of like the love-hate list I made. There is an eeriness to something that you're around every single day, and that switch being flipped where it becomes a non-issue to being an issue.
Yeah.
Where I think like there are people that have tried it. Like I think Shyamalan tries to tap into it, but isn't always successful doing so. That I think Hitchcock was able to do that. A lot of people just can't. I don't know. Like they just seem to struggle with.
He often said, was quoted as saying that if you really want to scare people, don't take them out to some deserted alley in the middle of the night where they never would go, or some other really traditionally creepy place. Your scary thing has to be happening in broad daylight or in some very familiar place where they would never have expected horror to manifest itself.
Right.
And Hitchcock was very good at that, at having that sort of thing happen. A horror scene happening at a schoolhouse, or until Psycho, no one ever imagined that the shower would be a place to be afraid.
Right.
That's your ultimate security. It's like stepping back into the womb. Warm water,
when you step
silence.
back, you're incredibly vulnerable. In that moment.
And I don't think anyone realized that until after. Here's a funny story, and then we could talk a little bit about some of our favorite films. There's a movie called Diabolique, which is partly what inspired Hitchcock to make Psycho, because when Clouseau made Diabolique, it's a French film. It was made in the late 50s. They started calling him the French Hitchcock. Okay. And Hitch was mad about that because he said there's only one Hitchcock.
Okay.
But Diabolique has a scene where someone is drowned in a bathtub.
Okay.
So somebody wrote a letter to Hitchcock saying, "Look, I've seen Diabolique and I can't take a bath. and now I've seen Psycho and I can't take a shower. And Hitchcock said, send yourself out to be dry cleaned.
That's all you have left. You have no other choices.
Anyway, so
Really
let me throw one thing in
Yeah,
here.
go for it.
I'm just remembering when we were talking about bloodless films. Here's a good one to keep an eye out for. Have you seen The Others with Nicole Kidman? Basically a haunted house story.
Yes. So I have seen like clips,
Okay.
but I've never seen the whole movie.
Very well done.
Okay.
Bloodless film, good storyline, very well acted, very atmospheric.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that she was not that Nicole Kidman is not relevant, but that was she was having a moment then. That was kind of when she was really
I think
feeling
that's maybe 15 or 20 years ago. I can't remember for
Okay.
sure. I know it's in, I'm going to make a plug here. I have the best movies you never saw.
That's right.
And I know The Others is in here, so I can easily look up.
Okay.
I can easily look up the year.
Yes.
Do you have any others you want to recommend?
I can literally picture her in that movie because that's how many like scenes and clips I've seen from it, but I've never seen it from
She
start
basically
to finish
carries the 2001, so it's 20 years old.
Okay. No, we talked about Paranormal Activity. I put that down, and again, these are just some that like have stuck with me. We talked about Get Out. I saw Nope this summer. I've seen the whole Jordan Peele catalog. I don't know if I'm a little nervous about the kind of like Shyamalan trend of just like we're kind of going this way instead of that way. However, I have enjoyed everything Jordan Peele has done. I saw a movie just this past month. It is called Barbarian.
Oh,
Have you heard of this movie?
Yes. My son likes horror films, and he was telling me about this as like almost unwatchable. It was so scary.
It is. It's so scary in all the. It's scary in the sense that every time you think, the moment you relax because you know what you're watching, you are wrong. Like you're just wrong. And the funny part is I knew that going into it. Like going into this movie, I knew that whatever I thought was probably not going to happen. And every time I relaxed, sure enough, like I was wrong. Not terribly gory. There's some stuff that's awkward. Like there's certainly some scenes that it's kind of like, I don't want to see this. But for the most part, I mean, it's a quick hour and a half. I mean, it flies. And I would argue 85-90% of the movie is not like this gory, thing. Just there's a couple of cut scenes in this movie where you almost have to reset because you're like, well, wait a second, we were just, and now we're, and so it is incredibly.
Well, you certainly got my interest up, Jeff.
It's just very, very unique and again, for anybody that doesn't love scary movies, Barbarian is like tiptoeing that line of watchable and like not watchable. Really good. And I like Justin Long. A lot of people don't like Justin Long. I enjoy Justin Long, and he's good in this. I also wrote down here because I just think it's ingenious. Quiet Place. Have you seen The Quiet Places?
Yes, I've seen both of them.
I think it's so hard. We've talked a little bit about this today.
There's another movie that doesn't have any blood in it. Well, it's got a little gore at the end, but
I agree.
It's alien gore, so it doesn't count.
That's right. It's not the same thing. I just think it's so hard today to create stuff that's original, that the premise is original, and this is one of those. Not only do you need to see it in a theater because the theater experience is better than watching it at home.
Yeah.
Because if someone makes a noise in the theater, you're like looking like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, stop. Like,
that's funny.
Yes, and I just think the premise of it. I think it's very hard to be simple and original, and somehow this movie is simple and original. Really, really well done.
You got to wonder if there's anything Emily Blunt can't do.
She's incredible.
It's just like she's superhuman.
She's absolutely incredible. I have down here, this is, in my opinion, like we talked about if we knew like the scariest or not. And I always go back to this. The Strangers.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that. Is that a recent film?
So probably over a decade old now.
Okay.
The Strangers it's based off of a true story. And it is your typical, you are in the house and someone is trying to get into the house. And it is just, it's haunting in the ways that most of the time for a scary movie, it's like this. It's the jaws of like, da-na, 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 da, and you're like speeding up. This movie is haunting because it never actually speeds up.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. It's in front of you and you see it and you know it and it's just lingering. And it just gets inside of you and it just tears you apart. You can't be safe anywhere. You'll never be safe again. And so I know I'm doing for people who don't like horror movies, I'm doing a horrific job convincing people to watch this movie. But it's beautifully disheartening, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how a movie can be so disheartening and yet incredibly well done and incredibly beautiful to watch. But this movie does that, and it is terrifying. So
Mm-hmm.
there you go.
Yeah.
That is my absolute like tipping point. Anything beyond The Strangers, I can't do. I'm out.
Oh, you mean in terms of scariness?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think part of that is, like I said, it's not this. What's weird about this horror movie is there is no reveal, because again, like you are watching them linger the entire time. You know the strangers are there. The characters do not. But it's not like the shock of like cutscene or the shock it jumps out, or you just know what's lingering. And so for an hour and a half, you are just like melted into your seat because you're like, oh my gosh, they don't know. They don't know. And so it's just very, very well done.
There was one I was going to mention, and because I sort of have blanked on the name of it, so I'm going to have to look it up here. But you mentioned the movie instead of speeding up. That's kind of what Hitchcock does in Psycho. He said after we had that key scene, which we might as well. If you haven't seen Psycho, you don't want to watch the next 2 minutes of this. But
Right.
Once the first murder, once that's all cleaned up, the film is exactly halfway over. The movie's I think the movie's 109 minutes long, and you're at about minute 54.
Okay.
And Hitchcock says, I knew that after I did that to the viewer, and told them that I was going to show them that I was willing to break all the rules, I didn't have to do much else.
Yeah.
There's only 2 other scary scenes after that, and they're both really short. And the rest of the film is quiet, but you are totally hooked because he completely undoes you with one major scene, and after that you're sort of always wondering what's going to happen next.
Sure.
So
interesting. The only other ones, because I didn't really write these down, these are more just kind of like my fan favorites. I love Arachnophobia. I don't know if you...
I haven't seen it.
I really, really enjoyed
that. I would have to watch alone because my wife does not care much for spiders.
There's just a ton of comedy involved in it. Jeff Daniels, what a coincidence.
There it is.
It's a Jeff Daniels movie as well. So just very, very well done. Right. I actually used it for a 8th grade language arts class.
Wow. Okay.
Once, just to talk about, the different tropes and all the different things going on in the movie. So really, really enjoyed it.
Okay. I can't think of this film. I'm not sure it's even in this book, but it's basically a haunted house story, and Daniel Craig and Naomi Watts are both in it.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm thinking of. Anyways, it's a continuous tracking shot. The film is basically one shot.
Oh, just one shot.
Now they faked it a little bit, like in 1917. I'm sure you guys know 1917 is one continuous shot, but there are cuts. They're just artificial cuts that you don't see. And Silent House is what the movie was called. Silent House. And it's interesting for that reason. I also found the movie really scary, although most people didn't care for it because they thought it was too formulaic.
Okay.
But just the idea, and the camera even goes outside the house, goes all over goes inside a car, goes down to the lake, comes back in the house, goes upstairs, downstairs, but there's no cuts. So, and then that's the same guy that directed. Here's a film that left me mentally unhinged.
Okay.
Open Water. Have you seen Open Water?
So I have seen Open Water.
Oh man, that was almost cruel to the viewer to put them through that.
Well, also, the other cruel thing too is I didn't think it was very good.
Oh, okay.
Did you think the movie was good?
Yeah, I thought it was well made.
Well, that's good. Okay. So, I mean, that helped. So not only was it brutal to watch, I also thought it wasn't a great movie either. So
you didn't think it was well made?
No, I think well made and dislike are different things, right? Because I think a movie can be incredibly well made and I can dislike it. But no, there's something about, because surviving in the ocean to me is that world doesn't fascinate me. It's not visually stimulating, just floating in the ocean. And then on top of it, the elements to me are very blunt. It's a shark. It's the weather. I don't know. It doesn't.
There's no nuance, in other words.
It for whatever reason, that aspect doesn't work for me. So someone could make a beautiful, surviving in the ocean movie, and I would sit there and be like, "This is very well made," but it wouldn't be for me. That was my. There was a movie like 4 or 5 years ago with an Indian actor. It got nominated. He's surviving on a boat with a
Life
tiger.
of Pi.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I thought Life of Pi was unbelievably well done. I don't know. It just didn't. It didn't.
That was my favorite movie that year.
Was it? Well,
Yeah.
please enlighten me. Make me feel better about it.
Part of it was the technical aspect.
Okay.
The director, Ang Lee, who's very accomplished and has done a variety of things, he's on record as saying, by the way, this is about a kid who gets stuck in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger.
But it's his retelling, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But Lee said, I would rather be stuck in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger than to have to make that movie again. It took him 4 years.
Okay.
He worked with 2 or 3 of the things that are hardest to work with in film: animals,
Yep.
kids,
Okay.
water,
Yeah.
and 3D.
Yeah.
So he's working with all of these. With a 3D has to be filmed with 2 cameras, by the way. So he's working with, just an incredible technical achievement.
Yes.
I wasn't crazy about the storyline. I had read the book. I wasn't crazy about exactly the way it was laid out, but I thought as a technical achievement in terms of the way it was filmed, the visuals, the animals, which I think about 95% of the animal shots in there were CGI, and it really does not look like CGI.
No, it's
amazing.
I 100% give him credit.
And by the way, the guy who headed up that creative team is a Bucknell graduate.
Really?
So he was down there talking about what a pain in the neck that film was to make.
Really, really interesting. Well, here, I mean, this is my argument against like ocean movies. They had a boat, survival, a tiger, animals, and I was like, nah. Like I still
didn't work for you.
So I guess what I'm saying is like you need to add all of that in to even for me to just kind of be like, oh, okay, like I don't know, it doesn't work, which is weird because I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it's not worth explaining. I think for an apocalyptic setting, it's the blandest apocalyptic setting you could have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think that's
well said.
Last thing I want to ask you, because I think this is always a hot button question, especially in the horror genre. I think M. Night Shyamalan gets a bad rap. I think
that's funny because I wanted to go to him last as well.
So great. This is perfect. I think I'm trying to think how I want to say this. His trajectory has almost played against him. I think what he's willing to try and what he's willing to do is way more important than continually making The Sixth Sense over and over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And did you see Old?
I did.
Okay. That didn't work for me at all.
I didn't like it.
Yeah. But it's guts.
Yes.
Right? I mean, here he's making a movie that no one has ever made before. You go to the beach and you automatically get older. You age like, 5 years every hour or something like that. It's crazy. He does manage to explain it a little bit at the end, but it's at least it's audacious and original and suggests that he's a filmmaker who wants to take chances. Unlike, you talked about how you keep seeing the same horror movie over and over again. Old's not like any other horror movie you ever saw. So you have to give him props for originality. And what I think is interesting is, his career did have that trajectory. He never seemed to be able to get back to The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable is a great movie as well.
Yes.
But then when it had just about dwindled down to nothing, he made The Visit and Split, both of which were made very cheaply and both of which made a ton of money. I mean, I was a high school teacher at the time. I had kids going to see Split and loving it who they had never even heard of The Sixth Sense or Unbreakable.
So to them, it was their own separate movie.
So this whole business with the Bruce Willis thing in Split, they completely did not pick up on that at all.
Okay.
So for him to sort of reinvent himself like that, and for teenagers to suddenly be saying, "Oh, you got to see this movie Split. It's really, really scary," having no idea that he already had a career that was 25 years long, I think was very impressive. And we're not finished with him yet.
I don't think we're even close.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got the talent. You can pick out 5 or 6 genuinely excellent films that he's made. So just give him some time.
Yeah,
he'll get it worked out.
Well, I also think too, a lot of I liked The Village. You talk to some people.
I liked it pretty well too.
I thought it was. I didn't know what was going to happen. the cast now, like when you go back,
Right.
the cast is low. I didn't
Yeah.
in the moment it didn't feel like it,
Yeah.
but now it's like, oh my god, how did they get all these people to agree to do this M. Night Shyamalan movie? And I don't think The Happening is a good movie. I don't think it's an awful movie. I think it's very difficult to convince people to go. I won't ruin The Happening, but I think it's difficult for people to enjoy watching The Happening. Like no one's going to enjoy themselves watching what happens in The Happening. So I think because of that, it gets more of a knock than what it probably should be. He's to me, he's one of the most interesting directors because I don't know if any other director has had their first movie held against them as much as M. Night Shyamalan has, and it's a fascinating thing because, like Jordan Peele, to me, Jordan Peele could put out something tomorrow, and I'm going to see it. But no one holds Get Out against, like, Get Out doesn't work against Jordan Peele.
Right.
I would be fascinated to hear what people thought of M. Night Shyamalan if he wouldn't have made The Sixth Sense, or if The Sixth Sense was not his first movie.
Yeah. And you know, I did kind of want to come back to that because if you pinned me to the wall and said, okay, you got to name the 4 or 5 of your all-time favorite scary movies, I put The Sixth Sense on there.
Okay.
And it's not just a gimmick movie. I mean, I suppose most of our viewers have seen The Sixth Sense and know about it, but it works on every level. It works in terms of character. It works in terms of message. It actually has a reasonably upbeat ending where almost everyone actually gets healed of the problems that they're dealing with. It has brilliant acting. Toni Collette is in it. Olivia Williams, Mark Wahlberg's brother, Donnie, appears briefly at the beginning. Emotionally, it works, and it's scary. I like to stay in a movie when the credits roll. So if you're at the theater and you're standing there waiting, coming in for the next show, and there's still some idiot sitting down front because the credits from the previous showing are still running, it's probably me. But when we went to Sixth Sense, my wife said, you can stay in here and watch the credits yourself because I'm going out in the lobby. So she was just slightly unhinged by that film. And I had this fun experience when we used to do irony in class. I would occasionally show The Sixth Sense. And my last year of teaching, I had a class of freshmen. So these are 14-year-old kids.
Okay.
None of them had ever seen The Sixth Sense, nor did they know about it.
So it wasn't spoiled for them.
Right.
That's almost as fascinating as anything else.
Continue, and you could have heard a freaking pin drop in that room.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're jumping for the scary scenes because there are a couple jump scenes there that really work. Totally hooked by the film, and also completely hornswoggled by it. Yeah. Not one of them foresaw what was going to happen. What was going to happen in the plot line.
Did you catch it? Did you
know
what was coming?
Not when I saw it.
Have you ever met somebody who has claimed to know that they
knew? I think so, yeah. But
do you believe them?
Who knows at this point?
I don't. I just inherently don't believe somebody when they say like, "Oh yeah, I knew what was going to happen." I don't believe them.
Yep.
I find that.
But the thing about The Sixth Sense is, it's a genuinely great film even before that.
Yes.
In terms of, I mean, just that incredible scene where they go to that house where a funeral is going on, because they know how the girl died. It's a masterpiece. It's only about 6 minutes long, but there's so much emotion behind that. So it's a legit, and one of the few horror films that's been nominated for Best Picture. That just doesn't happen very often. So I wanted to come back and say, yeah, folks out there, if you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, or if you have seen it and you think it's all only about the ending, watch it again, because it ain't. It's just it's the complete package.
Yes. No, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for coming.
Yep.
Really, really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you to Weis Markets for being our title sponsor. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. And thank you for watching the Midday Show. Mark will be back with me on Monday. I'm sure we're all very, very excited for Mark to come back.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. Enjoy it. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Joe Smith. Thank you for watching the Midday Show.